Hello. You guys don't understand how proud I am of myself for being ready to film another video so quickly. It didn't take me a year and a half this time, and I think that's pretty good. That's a good change. Last video I mentioned I was reading this right now, Her Pretty Face by Robyn Harding, and it was an easy read. It was very quick. It's only like technically over 300 pages, but like look at the spacing though. Like I think I did this in, I actually don't know. Time doesn't exist anymore since I like got out of school. I have tea. It is lemon ginger tea. It smells like Fruit Loops a little bit. I think lemon just smells like Fruit Loops though. Like I think Fruit Loops are lemon flavored, which is kind of bizarre because like you put milk on cereal and like lemon and milk doesn't seem like the most appetizing combo. Her Pretty Face, Robyn Harding. I am going to read the synopsis from the back. Frances Metcalf is struggling to stay afloat. A stay-at-home mom whose troubled son, Marcus, is her full-time job. She thought that the day he got accepted into the elite Forester Academy would be the day she started living her life. Overweight, insecure, and lonely, she's desperate to fit into Forester's world. But after a disturbing incident at the school leads to the other children and their families to ostracize the Metcalfs, she feels more alone than ever before, until she meets Kate Randolph. Kate is everything Frances is not: beautiful, wealthy, powerful, and confident. And for some reason, she's not interested in being friends with any of the other Forester moms, only Frances. So I'm just gonna say right now, huge trigger warning. There's like a lot of eating disorder content in here that kind of jumps at you like from the first page, and if you're not expecting it and you struggle with that kind of thing, that can be not the thing that you want to run into. There's also a section that kind of touches on self-harm a bit. Yeah, there's also some substance abuse in here. I don't know if that is a thing that would be triggering. I don't know if it's talked about in a way that would be triggering. I don't have experience with substance abuse, but if you do, it might be, you know, something that you just want to like be aware of. There are also some details of like somewhat graphic sexual assault in this, so like bear that in mind. While I was reading it, I was about like halfway through or something, and I took some notes down like just so I wouldn't forget them. On page 10, there's a quote that says, such a pretty face. No crueler words had ever been uttered. The context was there was like this mom that Frances was talking to at the school, and she was basically like, Frances was being body shamed by the mom, and Frances was kind of just reflecting on all of the experiences that she's had kind of being body shamed, and how like saying such a pretty face is like kind of a passive aggressive jab. I understand where she's coming from, but it just felt like very like, girl, those are not the cruelest words that have ever been uttered. Like, you're a very fortunate individual if that's the worst thing you've ever heard. This quote on its own really didn't rub me the wrong way that much. Like, I know I'm reading too far into it right now, but in general, the whole novel kind of builds on a very like white woman centered world. No one's like ethnicity is relevant to the story at all, and she never describes anyone as like this white man or like this white woman in any like setting. She never describes the scene like that. And I really just don't like the way that she describes characters, like physicality of characters. She tends to focus a lot on weight, like a lot. I'll get into that later. And if there is a person of color, it's like she kind of just dropped a few people of color into the story just for like inclusivity. There's just a couple times where there's like a character like a cashier or something. They're not really relevant to the story, but she'll be like the black man at the counter, like, and then she'll like continuously describe him. Like every time that she mentions this character, she will insert the word brown or black or like something about his skin tone, and I'm like, you don't do that with any other character. Obviously, if you need a descriptor for someone, including their ethnicity or like skin tone is helpful. but like these are very like not relevant characters, and like she'll just insert. She also does that with like one gay character. Like it's not nothing, there's no queer coding for him, not like queer coding, there's no like even queer baiting for him at all in the story. And then randomly at the end she's like, DJ came out. No exploration of, you know, like his experience as a gay man, nothing like that. Like there was nothing about him being gay at all until randomly at the end it's like there's like a few sentences that's like DJ grew up and came out, and then he told his husband all of his secrets from his past. And then we just move on. Maybe that's not a bad thing. I just think like it is good to include queer people, and you don't have to make their whole personality trait being queer. Like that is very refreshing to see, but at the same time, in a world where queer people are very starved of representation, this felt so half-assed. DJ is someone who struggled with a lot of things growing up. He had like a binge eating disorder, he had an abusive father, his sister died, his mother left him, and obviously like there's all of this emotional turmoil. It's, I think also this is based, his plotline is based in the past in America. There would definitely be some relevance with him being gay, like him growing up gay and like having that, like there, it's unrealistic to talk about all of these other things that he's dealing with and then it never is mentioned. Like there's no indication that that's something that he is trying to come to terms with, and I just think that that's not the most realistic representation. Like yes, this story doesn't have to center around him being gay, but like you could put in a little more effort, you know? Another thing I didn't love about this book was there's just some awkward language. I noted page 16, page 19, and 59 for examples of like awkward language. Okay, so page 16, there's a chapter told from Daisy's perspective. Daisy is a teenager. She's the daughter of the character Kate. It's just about Daisy getting high with a character Liam. There's just a sentence and it reads, Daisy was undeniably lit. It just sounds cringy, does it not? It's just a weird thing for the narrator to say. It also just didn't need to be there. Like the paragraph previous had already explored like she was high, like it was already explained and everything. It's like Robyn Harding just wanted to use the word lit. There's also this one passage on page 19. Suddenly Daisy felt completely lucid, the pleasant fog of her high dissipating, leaving her painfully clear-headed. She opened her mouth, but no words came out, because there were no words. Liam had pegged her. There was something very wrong with her. There was... Okay, so basically previous to this, Daisy and Liam were like getting kind of hot and heavy, and Daisy wanted to move further, and Liam did not. I just felt like this was not good timing to use the word pegged. Maybe that's just a personal thing. Maybe my mind is just eternally living in the gutter. And then there's another section on page 59. So basically the character DJ, he is learning about the murder of his sister, and like he's reading the newspaper and like reading the details of it basically. And it's a pretty like the tone is serious in this chapter, like the whole time. Like nothing is ever like not serious ever in DJ's entire like narrative. Obviously dark comedy is a thing, but this like isn't dark comedy though, and like she just didn't do it right. Literally it reads, DJ's bowels loosened as he read and he had to run to the toilet. Maybe his mom was right. Maybe he was too young to know. He brought the paper with him and inspected the mugshot of Shane Nelson as he shit. How eloquently put. Look, I don't think that, you know, this subject matter is not something that you can put in books. I mean, The Bell Jar, that's my favorite fucking book ever. And there's like a whole section about Esther and her roommate getting food poisoning and basically shitting their brains out. And that shit was written well. I was impressed. It wasn't ridiculous, but it was like a realistic, like, well, fuck, now we have food poisoning. That really sucks. But this was such a brief moment, and it was so out of place, and it just read like so, like, did you really just write that? It kind of just read like it was there for shock value, and it was just like quite crude. Or maybe it was like an attempt to be kind of like gritty, but like it just didn't feel right. Also, there are like multiple spelling errors, and like, who's your editor? The main gripe that I had with this was like the way that they talked about eating disorders. They never explicitly talked about eating disorders, but they were definitely eating disorders. Like, it was eating disorder behavior. And it was like heavily suggested that one character, who was a very minor character and basically had no character development, it was heavily implied that she had a restrictive eating disorder. And the way that that was represented was kind of just like offensive, in my opinion. They didn't ever address her behaviors. Well, they didn't, like, there was no scene where she was engaging in eating disorder behaviors, really, but she was repetitively described as like this pale, anemic vegan, and like her extremely restrictive diet. And I don't know if it was supposed to be just a jab at like vegans, or if it was like this girl's being made fun of for having a restrictive eating disorder. And both of those possibilities are just like gross. Like, even one part was like, basically said Maya is the name of the character. It basically was just like Maya was not pretty. She was the type of girl who like would hang out with someone prettier than her because she thought it would rub off on her. And it's just like, Jesus Christ, like, give her a break. The only thing that we know about how she looks is that she's like pale and thin. Does that make someone ugly? Does that mean they have an eating disorder? No. And of course she could have an eating disorder, but it just like, there was no, it was almost like, I feel like Robyn Harding did this a lot. She almost used mental illnesses as a personality trait, but without really exploring them. Like, the character Kate was a neat freak, and she referred to this as textbook OCD. And I just feel like that's misleading, because that's like a huge stigma around OCD, is like it's being a germaphobe, it's being a neat freak, and that is absolutely not it at all. Like, that it can manifest in that way, but that isn't what OCD is. And then it is like never explored. It's just like that surface level, like, she's a neat freak, kind of just to make that character seem like she's got like turmoil going on. But it's never explored. Like, we never hear from Kate's perspective. It's actually something that like her daughter Daisy kind of just uses to like not ridicule, but like look down on her mom for, like kind of judge her mom for, is like, she's a neat freak, OCD. Like, I just really didn't like the way that that was written about. That being said, not all mental illness was depicted poorly in this. Actually, like, ADHD, not a mental illness, but you know, it's like kind of in the same realm of things. People often think it's a mental illness, but basically ADHD, Marcus, the character Marcus, who is Francis's son, he has pretty severe ADHD, and I thought it was represented pretty well. I have ADHD. I think I'm, you know, I think my opinion is pretty valid. I know people experience it differently, but for me, it was accurate. Marcus is, I think he's like 11 in this, at the beginning, and he basically, like, his impulse control is just very poor, and he does have a lot of growth. I remember being that age, you know, with ADHD, and I didn't understand really what ADHD was. I had like no impulse control. Like, if I was mad at someone, if they did something passive aggressive to me, I would just do something aggressive to them. Like, I wasn't like the fighting type, but I was the type to just like call someone a bitch, like in front of like the teacher, if I really was heated, like I was just constantly doing things that I regretted afterwards. And also Marcus just tends to have like overreactions to things. Like this girl was bullying him on the playground and he straight up pissed in her water bottle. I can't say that I've pissed in anyone's water bottle, but I can say that I have been that mad at people, like, for doing things that, like, you know, other people might be able to just brush off, but, like, with ADHD, things just affect you. Like, your emotions can be very dysregulated. Emotions can just be very overwhelming, and, you know, you get meltdowns. You get, it can feel really embarrassing, like, knowing that you're reacting so strongly to something that other people probably wouldn't. And that is very accurately depicted with Marcus. Like, he does have meltdowns, and they're usually about very, like, not like yes, small things that other kids probably just would be able to deal with. Like, he's playing video games and his mom is trying to drop him off at school, and he doesn't want to, like, put down the iPad or whatever he has, and, like, his mom is like, you know, like, I understand that's important to you, but it's not fair to show up late and, like, interrupt the class. And actually, Frances, the mother, does handle this in a very good way. It does read like Robyn Harding knows shit about ADHD and has probably, like, you know, done her research or had experience with, like, the treatment for ADHD, like, proper treatment, because Frances does interact with her son in the way that you are supposed to with a child with ADHD. She doesn't invalidate his feelings when he's having a meltdown. Yeah, like, she's just honestly a very good parent for someone with ADHD, in my opinion. The language that she chooses with him, I think she goes a little bit overboard sometimes, like, especially with, like, the diet culture. There's so much diet culture in this book in general, but, like, Frances has taken sugar and gluten out of Marcus's diet because she thinks that it'll make his ADHD more severe, and that is okay. I can assure you, gluten and sugar are not, you know, they don't contribute to ADHD. Like, perhaps if you're having, like, a fuck ton of sugar, that's not really how sugar works, though. Like, you do get an energy boost, but, like, if there's too much energy at once, it just gets stored as fat. Like, I mean, I'm not a health expert, but, like, that's just not how ADHD works. At least it's not, from my understanding, from the research that I've done, from my own experience. There's no correlation between those things, particularly gluten. Gluten has no effect on my ADHD. But the way that she, you know, handles Marcus's emotions is very good. Like, it's very believable. Like, their dynamic is very believable. Another, you know, problem I have with this, it is, like, super fat phobic. Like, it's triggering for, like, the whole book. Like, from the first page, there's just a lot of language about, like, degrading bigger bodies, and I understand, like, the main character, Frances, she's overweight and she has a lot of, like, insecurity about that, and that is completely realistic, but Frances is not the narrator, and it's a third-person narrator. I wrote down one page to just pull a quote from, but it's basically endless. It's scattered throughout the entire novel. Like, this kind of language is just used constantly, but the thing that I took note of was, the door opened a crack to reveal Kate's mother. The plump but pretty woman from the photographs had disappeared, swallowed by this bloated, flabby version of her. Do I even need to explain myself? Saying plump but pretty, as if plump contradicts being pretty? And it's just relentless. Like, every time she describes someone, she's describing their ethnicity if they're not white, or she is saying, like, she looked at the obese woman across from her, the mother whose baby had grown up to commit such a heinous crime. Like, you already described her physicality relentlessly. We get it, you hate fat people. And, like, the way that Frances talks about her own weight, like, she acts like her having gained weight is her having failed as a wife and a mother and just as a woman. Like, and it's never addressed. Like, that is never addressed as a toxic belief in the end. In the end, she ends up losing weight and her life is just better. Like, it's never addressed as like, she's got some body image issues to work on or anything like that. And her body image issues are like never worked on at all. They're just like solved or improved by her losing weight. And like, that's not how it works at all. Like, losing weight is not going to improve your body image if you have like serious body image issues. If you see your weight as like a determining factor of your value, that isn't going to change, and it's always going to be a stressor for you no matter what weight you are. DJ is another character who he grew up with a binge eating disorder as like a maladaptive coping mechanism that he developed. And then eventually DJ kind of, when the killer of his sister gets out of prison, he responds to that trauma and kind of like stops eating. And this was actually portrayed as a good thing. It says, in a way, Amber saved his life because he stopped eating out of the trauma of her being released from prison and lost all of this weight. And it's just like, the fucking ignorance. There's other ways that, you know, like if you want him to come out better in the end, you could do that. I don't think it's appropriate at all to write that as like the result, like he stopped fucking eating from the trauma of his sister's killer being released from prison. That isn't saving someone's life. That is like, that was just fucking insensitive. And then he just grows up and he's not overweight anymore, and then his life is just good now. He becomes a psychiatrist, which I think that was cool. Like, his character development was very good, actually. The only thing that I had a problem with was the fucking eating disorder. Like, they don't explore, like, how does he heal from that? Because binge eating disorder is really not something that you can just, like, get out of. No eating disorder is something that you can just get out of. Like, even if it transitions from one eating disorder to a different eating disorder, which is what I'm assuming happened to DJ, because it says that he stopped eating. That's a restrictive eating disorder. That's still an eating disorder. It still has eating disorder behaviors. A lot of the behaviors from those two disorders overlap. You're not just better, you know? Like, losing the weight doesn't make you better. And that's the problem that I have with the way that eating disorders are portrayed here. Like, Maya, it's just, there's no exploration of her feelings or her thoughts. It's just, she's skinny. It's like the author sees eating disorders as a physical illness rather than a mental illness. And that is just, that needs to stop. Okay, so I'll talk about something I liked again. The character Kate, I think the way her character was kind of like nuanced, I really liked that. Like, Kate, who used to have the name Amber is a very hard character to pin. You kind of don't know whether to feel bad for her or not, and like, you just don't know how to feel about her. And I thought that was very interesting. Like, there's definitely different ways to read it. Some people will read it and be like, she's just evil, and that's a perfectly valid stance to take. And some people will probably read it and think, like, say that she deserves empathy. That's also a perfectly valid stance to take, and I really appreciate that. Like, I love a character with nuance. Another thing I really liked was the depiction of like female adolescence through the perspective of Daisy. At first, it was written kind of in an awkward way, in my opinion. I didn't think that the bullying that went on in her school, I didn't think that it was necessarily depicted accurately, although I have yet to fucking find anything that depicts bullying accurately, and maybe that's just my experience. I just feel like bullying is never like the aggressive, like, getting beaten up pranks and stuff. That was never really part of my experience. I'm sure it happens to people. I'm sure like that, you know, some people do relate to that, but like for me, bullying was always very passive aggressive. I kind of wonder if like these adults who are now writing young adult books and they're trying to depict bullying in high school, they're remembering their experience, which is valid, but they're setting the time period for now, and like it just doesn't add up, because like bullying changes so much through time. It has to, in order to like stay sneaky and stay alive basically. But otherwise, I thought that Daisy's perspective was very closely aligned to what it feels like to be a teenage girl. She is just forgetting that she's a kid, and I think that that is very relatable. Like I was literally just watching my That Was Then This Is Now video, and me the whole time just being like, I'm just too mature for like these kids that I go to school with. Like that's just such a teenager thing to think. Like I can't blame myself, because like probably most teenagers think that they're too mature for their surroundings. Like they don't want to be a kid anymore. Also, the other thing that I like, I think this is the last thing that I listed. No, okay, I have one more. I hate action. Movies, novels, doesn't matter. I hate action. I think it's so boring. I don't give a fuck about like fighting scenes. Like I just really don't care. There is no action really in this, and I appreciate that so much. I was expecting there would be some. In my experience, spooky books have like, there's a scene with action that I have to suffer through. And I really loved that this didn't have it. It didn't rely on action at all to tell the story. The last thing that I really like is just when you finish it, it leaves you with a lot to think about. I like that this story kind of wraps up in a way that you feel like it's wrapped up, but their lives are still going on. I'm going to finish my list of dislikes now. So the character Daisy and Liam, they, at the beginning of the novel, they're, you know, at Daisy's house. You know, they're thinking about hooking up, and then Liam doesn't want to. And Daisy, she doesn't like push it on him, but she kind of, the way that the narrator discusses him not wanting to is kind of just like, not right. So Liam says, "This is just moving too fast." His words stunned her. Weren't teenage boys supposed to be obsessed with sex, desperate to get laid? Trust Daisy to find the one guy who is too uptight, too immature, or too gay, maybe? How about we just respect people's consent or lack thereof? Like we just listen to them. We just don't judge them for what they do or do not want to do. And then another thing I really did not appreciate. There was some serious queer coding of the character Kate. The dynamic between Frances and Kate is very flirty, and that is addressed. There's a whole section where they talk about swinging, jokingly. Kate literally says to Frances, referring to her husband, Robert, "I'm sure Robert would love to get his hands on those big tits of yours." What? Like, supposedly the message is coming from Robert, but the words are coming from Kate. And then Kate's like, "If we ever were going to swap partners, it would definitely be with you guys." Do I need to be more clear? Frances had heard about this kind of friendship, intense, powerful, life-altering. Such friendships were unique to women, as a bond as profound and meaningful as sisterhood. Sisterhood. It wasn't sexual. It wasn't sexual, but it felt like falling in love. Like she and Kate were soulmates who had finally found each other. This alone could be not queer baiting, but it's after all of this discussion of like Frances describing how attractive Kate is, and like there's literal flirting between them. Like there's moments where Kate is like literally flirting with Frances, and Frances is thinking about it. She's like, she does at some point be like, do I want to kiss Kate? do I? And then they're just like, no, it's just gal pals. Are you kidding me? That is queer baiting. That's queer baiting. And then with the character Kate, it's just straight up queer coding a villain, as we've been doing for fucking centuries. Straight up just used queer coding with Kate, the villain. And they, you know, they did it in a way that supports her being the villain. Like her, trigger warning, she sexually assaults a teenage girl. It just reminds me of when, like, the only gay characters that would be in movies would be, like, they would have to be coded as, like, pedophiles. And, like if you have a gay character, they have to be a villain. So I just wrote down some questions that I thought would be worth discussing. Is Kate a sociopath? Does she have remorse? I think Kate is a sociopath. Like, she, you know, her ability to, like, do heinous things and not have really remorse about it, or we don't know that she didn't have remorse because there's no, like, completely reliable narrator throughout this whole story. The narrator only explores the thoughts and feelings of the character that they are, like, each chapter is dedicated to a different character. So yeah, the narrator can only explore what that character is thinking and feeling. So obviously, like, you're not gonna get a completely reliable narration. You can't know, like, no chapter is from Kate's perspective, so you don't know her inner thoughts. You only see the things that she's done, the things that she's told people, the way that she acts, and all through the lenses of people around her who have strong feelings about her. Does she have remorse though? I would say gray area. I would say that she has regret. I think she might regret it because it ruined her life. I don't think she necessarily feels bad for the victim, or if she does, it's not her main concern. Another question I have is, will Frances return to Kate? So basically in the ending, Kate moves out of town because it's discovered that she fucking killed someone. So, like, obviously the school, like, kind of has a witch hunt and, like, they get rid of her. They drive her out of town, essentially. It's like a year later, or possibly several years later, I kind of don't remember, but Kate is living somewhere. It's assumed that she's living in Louisiana, because Frances has gotten a text saying I miss you from a number from, like, Louisiana, and, like, who else would that be? Like, it's gotta be Kate. And then Frances is driving to her hometown to see her family who she's been estranged from, and she gets another text saying, please forgive me, I can't stop thinking about you. This is what gives Kate a lot of nuance, in my opinion, is because, like, what motivation could she have for sending that other than she does care about some people? Like, there's nothing that she can get from Frances other than, like, her friendship. Frances doesn't reply to this, but then, like, the novel just kind of ends. So my question is, do I think Frances will ever interact with Kate again on her own, like, by her own will? I think probably she will. I relate to Frances a lot, just, you know, being, like, so lonely sometimes and very desperate for companionship, and, like, when things are not going well, it can just feel like you need someone. She probably will reach out to her at some point, and eventually she'll stop reaching out. She might do it a few times. It could go badly a few times, and then eventually she will stop. It's like an addiction though, like, and I fully feel that. Like, there's someone who I constantly have the urge to reach out to. I haven't spoken to them in, like, a few years, and I just, like, I know that I can't reach out to them. Like, I cannot let them in my life because, like, it's just gonna have horrible results. But I will never stop wanting to, probably, because I had a very intense connection with this person. And it's the same with Frances and Kate. Like, yeah, Kate might be a monster, but you did feel some type of way about her. I also wrote down, was Kate's message to Frances sincere? I personally think it was. I don't know why else she would send that. Like, I don't see any ulterior motives. The next question I have is, do we think Kate is actively a threat to society? Personally, I don't think so. She was never sneaky. She got caught on her first crime fairly quickly. Like, this was not a prolonged investigation. She's been living at least 14 years without recommitting any crime, and like with 2 children who she hasn't harmed. She's not a threat to society. Like, I think that she's proven that she is not a threat to society, and she was young when she committed the crime, and she's done therapy. Also, Kate was not impulsive with the way that she killed. Like, she clearly has impulse control. She has more reasons to not commit crimes than she does to commit crimes. Like, I don't see her doing it again. Like, unless her life completely falls apart or something and like she has nothing left to lose, that's the only circumstance I can see her, you know, but like hopefully someone fucking checks up on her to make sure like she's not, you know, losing her damn mind. She has a pretty good life, and she seems to enjoy it. She wouldn't just throw it away. The next question I wrote down was, would I continue to be friends with Kate if I were in Frances's situation? So Frances, like, she kind of wants to continue being friends with Kate. It's like, it's not like Stockholm syndrome because she wasn't abused in any way by Kate, but like, she doesn't want to let go, and that's completely understandable. Been there, done that. I don't know what I would do. Like, obviously this is a very intense situation. I probably wouldn't reveal that I know about Kate's past. I think whether or not I would continue to be friends with her would more depend on what's happening rather than my actual feelings. If the whole situation can kind of just be swept under the rug and we can pretend like it didn't happen, I probably would. I would probably continue being friendly with her. I would probably feel very weird around her and not want to see her, but I wouldn't cut her out because I would be scared of her. Yeah, I would continue socializing. I'd keep my mouth shut. Like, I'm just not trying to incite anything. My last question is, does everyone deserve forgiveness? I think if you've been hurt by someone, you do not owe them anything. But nobody deserves to be in misery forever. I think everyone should have someone on their side, even if they're in the wrong. And I don't mean on their side as in like someone who agrees with the things that they've done. If you've done something wrong, you've done something wrong. But I think everyone deserves to have someone to care about them, and they can recognize that they did something wrong, but they can forgive them in terms of, you did this thing that was bad, but I'm still gonna care about you. Okay, so finally, would I recommend this book, and who would I recommend this book to? I would not recommend this book to someone who is very, very sensitive to sexual assault, eating disorders, maybe someone who has some like body image issues. I would say this could be very triggering for people in that situation. I would recommend this book to people who can like handle that subject matter. I thought that the story was very similar to A Simple Favor, that movie with like Blake Lively, I think, and Anna Kendrick. If you liked that movie for the plot, you would really like the plot of this also. Same with Gone Girl. I think if you read Gone Girl for the plot and liked it, you would probably like this also. Also, the language is very accessible, like it's very easy to comprehend. Okay, so that's all I have to say about the book. On a separate note, I have found this YouTube channel called Uncarly, spelled Uncarly. Like, she's literally just such a cool person. Like, I want to be her when I grow up. I just wanted to mention that because I've been like binge watching her videos, and I feel like I'm picking up on her language and possibly mannerisms a little bit, so I don't want to be out here just like copying her and then like not mentioning you know, where that came from. But yeah, that's basically all. Go like look at her channel. I mean, if you are interested in this type of video, like if you actually like this content, like yeah, you'll definitely like her. Yeah, that's all I have to say really for this video. Goodbye.